What's the wildest conspiracy theory you've heard that someone actually believes? D.B. Cooper survived and lived in a shack on Mt. St. Helens. He perished when the volcano erupted. A corollary to that, taken from a YA novel, is that Sasquatch are a species of aliens sent to protect their portal to home on Mt. St. Helens from humans. D.B. Cooper was a tactical assassination after he got too close to the truth, so the Squatches had to blow it up to cover their tracks and leave Earth. That's why we haven't had a good old Squatch photograph in a while. A former neighbor of mine claimed that there was a gold mine underneath the apartment building we lived in. She claimed that she saw miners going into secret entrances in the middle of the night, and the landlord was getting filthy rich without sharing anything with us. She couldn't explain how they shipped the gold out without anybody noticing, or how an apartment building could be built directly on top of a mine. She seemed sane enough before that conversation, so I was really surprised. Why would he share it anyways? Why would he even rent the place out if he literally was sitting on a gold mine? Something like this happened in New York City recently. A man swore he heard Jews under his apartment. They were distinctly speaking Yiddish. Everyone thought he was crazy and called him nuts. Turns out he was right. There was a tunnel being constructed illegally beneath his apartment connecting to a synagogue, and he could hear them speaking Yiddish. Perhaps your neighbor really did see something odd. So this is a super odd one. I've heard most of the more common ones, but this lady blew my mind. I am the lead teacher in the infant room at a daycare. There was a couple taking a tour of our facility for their upcoming baby. Mom was still pregnant during this. So as they are standing in the room and I'm doing my usual spiel of what a day typically entails, I mention that I have certain toys that are really helpful in identifying colors. Somehow I mentioned something about primary and secondary colors. Mom starts freaking out. She doesn't believe in primary and secondary colors. I was a little confused, but she kept saying that primary and secondary colors was just an idea, which I sorta got, but she was full on in the belief that Crayola was behind the push of separating and defining colors and that everything in regards to that was part of the big color industry. She used the words big color industry. Like, for real. I had no idea how to respond, so I just segued into other things we do through the day and prayed that they would not enroll their kid. We never heard from them after the tour, and honestly, kind of glad. Big color industry? I was honest to God flabbergasted. The latest one I've heard is 2 parts. The first part is that both Donald Trump and Joe Biden have many clones, and that they all go to Camp David every year for a checkup. The reason they have these clones so when one of them gets assassinated, a lot of them have been evidently, they can just replace Trump and Biden with clone. Also, Trump is president, but Obama is actually running the country. And that JFK, JR is going to be Trump's running mate. But it's not really JFK Jr., it's President Kennedy and a JFK Jr. mask. Oh, and the medbeds. Don't get me started on the medbeds. Recently heard one that said that hurricanes are specifically targeting Florida, because Florida gets hit with so many hurricanes. Make it make sense. I hate that I may know what they are trying to say. The conspiracy is about cloud seeding. Basically, it's where you can make it rain or snow by seeding the clouds. Anyways, scientifically, it can be done, but it isn't advanced enough to actually control the weather. Basically, the conspiracy theorists will say after a major climate event, the deep state did it on purpose. I had asked why they do that. They said it was to trick us into believing in climate change. I even had a person on Twitter who thought they seeded the clouds to make it rain during a Trump rally, or they thought that Biden could have stopped the Maui fires by cloud seeding. I think the person was trying to say that since Florida has always experienced hurricanes, the deep state is purposely cloud seeding in Florida to make the hurricanes more often and more life-threatening. For some reason, the deep state likes to trick us all the time. Disclaimer, I am not a conspiracy theorist. The flat earth conspiracy will forever confuse me. Yeah, this one is incredibly dumb. There are many conspiracies that are quite wild, many that are quite dumb, but usually, there is at least some kind of notion in the backdrop where you could guess why people believe them. Like, okay, if you believe this, then you can more easily make sense of why WW2 happened, or etc. But with flat earth, there's just nothing behind it. There's no reasonable explanation for why the entire scientific community would go to enormous lengths to lie about the shape of the planet. Like, if it were flat instead of a globe, nothing else would change. It's just astonishingly inane, the whole thing. That USA schools stopped teaching cursive so people couldn't read the Constitution anymore. It's so dumb for a number of reasons. Mainly that anyone dumb enough to believe that certainly isn't smart enough to be able to read the Constitution even if they did know cursive. There's also about a couple million places you can find plain text copies of it. Idiots will believe anything if you make them angry enough about it. Not only that, but I also know teachers that teach cursive as part of their curriculum. So, an ex-coworker of mine spent an entire week's worth of lunch hours trying to explain to myself and 2 others that not only is the world flat, but there was a giant ring of ice surrounding us. Beyond that ring of ice were places like Atlantis, Asgard, Tamriel, yes, from the Elder Scrolls series, which he'd never played, etc. He even had photoshopped maps and random YouTube videos as proof. This is the same ex-coworker who flew Confederate flags and plastered his truck in Trump stickers while living in Canada, would hotbox his truck to get his newborn baby to sleep, throw wheelbarrows at his subordinates when they didn't follow his unclear instructions, and have fistfights with our boss, his brother, in the street out front of our customers' houses. Ever have a yard sale? Some very interesting people show up. One older gentleman pointed up at airplane contrails and then proceeded to tell me they were chemtrails created by the government, etc. He wasn't animated or over the top, just calm and confident, telling me what he believed to be happening. I've always found this particular theory particularly fascinating because how complicated the logistics get the more you think about it. People say it's the government, but you can see private passenger planes, cargo planes, etc. make contrails. So, now you have to have many private companies in on it as well, because the government wouldn't be able to fill up these planes with chemicals without their knowledge. You'd basically have to have trucks running around filling up planes, and someone has to be manufacturing the stuff too. The pilots and maintenance crews would have to be in on it. People who study air and water quality would have to be in on it, and so on. And contrails happen all over the world, so every government would have to be in on it, and all the private companies too. And after all that, you're just getting this stuff into the air, which everyone breathes, so they are poisoning themselves. I've seen people argue that they actually are somehow able to get themselves treated. So, now you have doctors in on it on a global level. It just gets so unnecessary complex, and the theories on why they are doing it are numerous as well. That the Great Fire of London was actually started by a rat spontaneously combusting. Might be some meat on that bone. It's widely believed to have been started in a bakery. Flour dust is insanely flammable. A single spark landing near a rat that's covered in flour, that lands near the spark, so they create a big poof of dust. To the untrained, I could look like a rat spontaneously combusting. Good thing I'm trained in flour and spontaneous rat combustion, so I could never make that mistake. Tartaria. You know those conspiracies that look at things like the pyramids and go, no, the ancient Egyptians couldn't have built that. There must be something more that big historian is covering up. Okay, imagine that. But they are also talking about, like, the White House or Penn Station. They see old buildings and go, man, they don't make them like that anymore, and decide that it's because of a lost civilization and massive cover-up, and not because architectural styles change over time. The conspiracy is that there was an ancient civilization called Tartaria that spanned the earth and created a bunch of buildings, mostly in the classical and neoclassical style, and they all had fantastical technology. Then, during World War I, it was destroyed and erased from the mainstream historic record. There are also mud floods cited as an example of Tartaria being wiped out, because some fairly old, but not in any way ancient, we're talking 1800s/1900s, buildings have basement windows, and the conspiracy theorists insist that that was actually the first floor of the buildings. It's called Tartaria because old European maps from like the 16th century labeled a large area of land in Central Asia Tartaria or Tartary because the map makers didn't know much about Central Asia, but the Tatars lived there, and it was given a vague designation. It stopped being labeled Tartaria when more and more information about the area became accessible, not because of a vast conspiracy. Edit. Also, the general idea was that the Tartarians were wiped out, but the Tatar people very much still exist. There are millions of them. They just don't, and have never had, a large unified empire like Tartaria. Canola oil stands for Canadian oil. It does. That means they get it from the ground. It does not. They put antifreeze in Pop-Tarts. They don't, and why in the hell would they? Donald Trump cheats on his taxes because he's a smart businessman. Illegal immigrants cheat their way out of paying taxes because they're despicable. All said by the same woman. She was constantly telling me how bad GMOs and vaccines are, but she smokes 2 packs a day. Sounds like a woman I know. She was praising the merits of Affordable Care Act, but was pissed that we decided to do Obamacare instead. Edit. I meant the Affordable Care Act. Not sure what I was thinking. Fixed it. What conspiracy theories have you heard in your life? Share them in the comments. Just click like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.